The pitchfork slipped from my sweat-slicked hands, clattering against the barn floor like a gunshot in the dead Wyoming quiet. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, as the silhouette in the doorway blocked out the dying sun, broad shoulders, dust-caked boots, a Stetson pulled low over eyes that burned like embers. "You look like hell, kid," he drawled, voice rough as gravel and twice as unyielding, stepping forward until I could smell the leather and smoke on him, close enough to shatter the loneliness I'd been choking on for years. I was Ralph Harlan, 28 and tethered to this godforsaken ranch like a lame horse to its post, scrubbing away at ghosts in the hayloft while the world spun on without me. Dad's old barn, sagging under the weight of unpaid bills and unspoken regrets, had been my prison since the accident that took him 3 summers back. Left me with a mountain of debt, a herd of half-starved cattle, and a secret gnawing at my gut that no amount of hard labor could bury. Gay in a town where queer was still spat like tobacco juice, I'd learned to swallow my truths with my morning coffee, dating the wind and dreaming in the dark. But that afternoon, as thunderheads bruised the sky over the Bighorn Mountains, Roy Callahan rode in on a sorrel mare that looked as wild as he did, and damned if he didn't upend every careful lie I'd built my life on. He tossed his saddlebags over one shoulder, the fringe of his chaps whispering against denim faded to the bone, and grinned, a slow, crooked thing that hooked into me like barbed wire. "Heard you need hands for the fall drive. Name's Roy. Your pa and mine go way back, before the bottle took him." His eyes, green as spring grass after rain, flicked over me, lingering just a beat too long on the rolled-up sleeves of my shirt, the way sweat traced paths down my neck. I mumbled something about the bunkhouse being full, but he just laughed, low and easy, like he knew I was full of shit. By dusk, he'd unsaddled his horse, forked fresh hay into the stalls, and cracked open a couple of PBRs on the porch, the two of us watching coyotes yip at the moonrise. "This place," he said, tipping his bottle toward the endless black horizon. "It's got stories in the wind. You hear 'em." I didn't answer, but hell, I felt them, stirring something feral in my chest, something I'd locked away since high school, when Tommy Ellis's kiss behind the bleachers ended with a black eye and a lifetime of what-ifs. That first night, sleep dodged me like a spooked colt. Roy's snores rumbled through the thin walls of the bunkhouse, a rhythm that synced with the pulse in my veins, pulling me under even as it kept me awake. Dawn broke with him already in the corral, breaking a sweat wrangling the fence mending, his shirt off by noon, muscles coiling like ropes under skin etched with tattoos, a faded eagle on his shoulder, script down his ribs I couldn't read from afar. I caught myself staring, hammer forgotten in my hand, heat crawling up my face that had nothing to do with the sun. "Eyes up here, Harlan," he called, not mad, just amused, wiping his brow with a forearm that spoke of miles under saddle. Lunch was beans and cornbread under the cottonwood, him spinning tales of rodeos from Cheyenne to Pendleton, bulls that bucked like demons, crowds roaring under neon lights, the thrill of a 8-second ride that left you bruised but alive. I listened, fork midway to my mouth, envying the freedom in his voice, the way he wore his scars like badges instead of burdens. By week's end, the ranch hummed with a rhythm we'd fallen into without trying, me plotting the herd's path north to the railhead, him mending what was broken, his hands steady on hammer and rope alike. Evenings blurred into bonfires, the crackle of pine logs mirroring the spark when our knees brushed accidental-like, or not so accidental. One night, after too many whiskeys chased the chill. He pulled out a harmonica, the notes wailing low and mournful, echoing the ache of old country tunes about lost loves and open roads. "Play something happy," I said, voice thicker than I meant, and he switched to a jig that had me tapping my boot before I could stop. His eyes met mine over the flames, holding steady, and in that flicker, I saw it, the mirror of my own hunger, raw and unapologetic. "You ever run from this life, Ralph?" he asked later, embers dying to glow. "Or you just waitin' for it to run you down?" I shrugged, but the question lodged like a thorn, drawing blood in the quiet hours after. Fall deepened, leaves turning the aspen gold as if the mountains were on fire, and Roy became the axis my days spun around. We'd ride the fence lines at dawn, him pointing out elk tracks in the frost, me sharing the ranch's history the way Dad taught me to read the wind for storms, how Ma's laughter used to fill the kitchen before cancer hollowed her out. He listened, really listened, his silence a balm on wounds I hadn't named. One afternoon, tracking a lame steer into a box canyon, our horses balked at a swollen creek, forcing us to ford on foot. Water hit mid-thigh, icy as judgment, and halfway across, Roy slipped on moss-slick rocks, going under with a curse. I lunged, arm around his waist, hauling him up sputtering and soaked. We collapsed on the far bank, chests heaving, his weight half on me, breath mingling hot against my collarbone. Time stretched, the world narrowing to the press of his body, solid and warm through wet denim. "Got you?" I whispered, and he turned his head, lips brushing my jaw, not quite a kiss, but close enough to ignite the dry tinder of want I'd banked for years. That brush lit the fuse. Nights grew restless, charged with the what-ifs we danced around. I'd wake to his silhouette in the doorway, moonlight carving shadows on his frame, and pretend sleep while my heart thundered. He started leaving coffee on the porch rail before sunup, black and strong like he knew it was the only way I'd face the mirror. During the branding, with the crew from town pitching in, he stood shoulder to shoulder with me, iron in hand, hissing steam rising like prayers unanswered. One cowboy, Buck from the feed store, slung a slur after a fumbled rope. "Watch it, Fairy," and Roy's fist connected before I could blink, splitting Buck's lip bloody. "Say it again," Roy growled, knuckles white, and the man slunk off muttering. Later, as we bandaged his hand by lantern light, I traced the split skin with my thumb. "Why'd you do that?" He met my gaze, unflinching. "Ain't right, lettin' folks talk trash 'bout kin. And you're more'n that, Ralph. Always have been." The air thickened, heavy with the scent of salve and unspoken vows, and when his fingers grazed mine, I didn't pull away. The first real kiss came under a harvest moon, bloated and silver as a silver dollar, after we'd wrestled a storm-damaged gate back into place. Rain had held off just long enough, leaving the air electric, ozone sharp. Exhausted, we slumped against the barn wall, backs to the weathered planks, shoulders touching. "Ralph," he said, my name a question on his tongue, and I turned, catching the vulnerability in his eyes, the crack in the cowboy armor. Our mouths met tentative, then fierce, salt and need and the taste of forever. His hat tumbled into the dirt, fingers threading my hair, pulling me closer until there was no space left for doubt. We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed, his whisper ragged. Been waitin' on this since I saw you in that barn. Lookin' like the world'd broke you, but you wouldn't let it. I laughed. Shaky. The sound foreign in my throat. And kissed him again. Slower. Mapping the shape of him like a man starved. From there, it was stolen moments in the hayloft. Bodies tangled in the loft's dim gold. Whispers muffled against skin. Roy's touch was reverent. Hands calloused from rains now gentle as a prayer. Tracing the freckles across my chest like constellations. You're beautiful, he'd murmur. Voice husky with awe. And I'd believe him, if only in those hours when the ranch slept. We talked then, futures unfurling like road maps. Him dreaming of a spread of his own in Montana. Me clinging to the land that was both anchor and chain. Come with me, he'd say one night, lips on my throat, breath warm. We could make it ours. The idea terrified and thrilled, a horizon I'd never dared chase. But doubt crept in with the frost, whispers of what the town would say, the crew's sidelong glances, the way Roy sometimes stared at the road like it called him home. November winds howled like banshees, stripping the aspens bare, and with them came the first fracture. A letter arrived, postmarked Casper, no return address, creased and yellowed, spilling from the mailbox like bad news inked in haste. Roy snatched it before I could, face paling under the stubble, and pocketed it without a word. That night, over venison stew, he was quiet, fork pushing peas like they held answers. Old debt, he finally said, when I pressed. Nothin' to fret, but his eyes skittered away, and the harmonica stayed silent. Days blurred into a tense rhythm, him riding out longer, returning with dust on his boots and shadows under his eyes. I found the letter crumpled in his saddlebag, words jumping like accusations. You owe me, Callahan. That night in the motel, you promised. Get back here or I tell everything. My stomach nodded, visions of fists and faded bruises from his rodeo tails twisting into something uglier. I confronted him at dusk. The barn our confessional once more, pitchforks leaning like sentinels. Who's it from? My voice cracked, betrayal bitter on my tongue. He leaned against a post, hat in hands, twisting the brim like a noose. X. From the circuit. Things got messy. He thinks I owe him for keepin' quiet. Quiet about what? The question hung. And he spilled it then, nights in cheap motels. A double life of bar hookups and hidden hearts. A brawl that left a man hospitalized. Whispers of assault charges hushed with cash he didn't have. I ran. Ralph. Ain't proud. But I ran. And now he's found me. His voice broke, raw as an open wound, and I wanted to hold him, to say it didn't matter, but the fracture widened, trust splintering like dry timber. Winter clamped down hard, snow blanketing the ranch in a hush that amplified every creak of doubt. Roy threw himself into work, mending roofs and hauling feed through drifts knee-deep, but the warmth between us cooled to embers. I'd catch him on the porch at midnight, cigarette glowing like a guilty secret, staring at the black ribbon of road snaking east. You leavin'? I asked one night, breath fogging the air between us. He stubbed the smoke, eyes haunted. Can't drag you into my mess. This place. It's yours. Clean. Me? I'm poison. Lies. Maybe. But they stung true enough, carving hollows where hope had bloomed. The crew noticed. Buck's lip curled in perpetual sneer. Rumors slithering like sidewinders. Callahan's trouble. Seen him with that drifter in town. I defended him fierce, but isolation gnawed, the ranch a cage closing in. Christmas Eve dawned brittle, sky leaden with promise of more snow. The herd was restless, lowing against the cold, and Roy and I rode out to check the upper pastures, breath pluming white. Halfway up the ridge, his horse threw a shoe, forcing us to dismount in a copse of firs heavy with hoarfrost. We worked in silence, him hammering the iron back while I held the hoof steady, gloved hands brushing accidental. "Remember that moon?" he said suddenly, voice soft against the wind. I nodded, throat tight, the memory of his mouth on mine a ghost between us. When the shoe held, we lingered, backs to a fallen log, the world muffled in white. He reached for me then, tentative, fingers lacing mine. "I love you, Ralph. God help me, I do. But I gotta fix this. Alone." The words landed like punches, love a blade twisting in the offer of goodbye. I pulled him close instead, desperate, our kiss salt-sour with unshed tears, bodies pressing through layers of wool and denial. Snow sifted down, gentle as absolution, and for a stolen hour, we were whole, hands mapping familiar paths, whispers vowing tomorrows we'd never see. But dawn brought the rumble of tires on the access road, a black Ford kicking up gravel. The ex-Jake, his name scrawled furious in the letter, stepping out with a sneer and knuckles scarred from the same fights. "Callahan," he barked, eyes raking Roy like ownership. "Time's up." Roy stiffened beside me, hand dropping from mine, and in that severance, betrayal bloomed cold as the drifts. The confrontation erupted fast, words flying like fists, Jake accusing theft, Roy countering with pleas of a debt paid in blood and silence. I stood frozen, the ranch my witness, until Jake lunged, grabbing Roy's collar, slamming him against the truck. "You think you can run to this hick hole and play house?" he snarled, spit flying, and the slur landed, aimed at us both. Roy shoved back, hard, but Jake was bigger, fueled by grudge, pinning him down in the snow. I moved then, instinct over fear, tackling Jake off, the three of us a tangle of limbs and curses. A crack echoed, my fist to Jake's jaw, Roy's boot to his ribs, and he scrambled up, bloodied but snarling. "You'll regret this, freaks. Whole damn town's gonna know." He peeled out, tires spinning mud, leaving us panting in the aftermath, Roy's face a mask of shame. "You shouldn't have," he started, but I cut him off, grabbing his collar. "Don't. You're not poison. You're mine." The admission hung, fierce and final, and he crumpled then, forehead to my shoulder, sobs muffled in my coat. We stumbled back to the barn, the day's light fading, and there, in the loft we'd claimed as sanctuary, we clung bodies urgent, seeking solace in skin, love a defiant fire against the encroaching dark. "Stay," I begged, as rhythm gave way to stillness, his weight heavy on me. "Fight with me." He traced my jaw, eyes searching. "For you?" "Yeah. For us." But Jake's threat festered, whispers turning to shouts by New Year's. The feed store cut credit. Buck rallied the crew to walk off, citing moral decay with pious sneers. Roy and I fortified, him wiring fences both literal and figurative, me penning letters to lenders, bartering pride for time. Nights were our republic, tangled sheets a borderland where doubts dissolved in touch. "What's our story?" he'd ask, fingers drumming my ribs. Two fools chasing stars, I'd reply, and we'd laugh, the sound a rebellion. Spring teased with crocuses pushing through snow, calves dropping under watchful eyes, and for a breath, hope greened the edges. Climax crashed mid-April, under a sky boiled black with thunder. Jake returned, not alone, two roughnecks from Casper, faces like chewed leather, flanking him at the ranch gate. Eviction notice, he crowed, waving papers, for non-payment. And a bonus, sheriff's on his way for assault. Lies layered thick, but the truck's bed held chains and intent. Eyes on Roy like wolves scenting lame prey. We faced them in the yard. Me with shotgun loaded but unfired. Roy's stance coiled fury. Words escalated to shoves. A roughneck's fist grazing my cheek. Blood warm on my lip. Roy exploded, tackling the man into the dirt. Fists flying in a blur of vengeance. Chaos reigned. Thunder cracking overhead as rain lashed down, turning earth to slurry. Jake swung a tire iron, catching Roy's shoulder with a sick thud, bone protesting. I roared, barreling into him, the world narrowing to payback, my knuckles splitting on his teeth. The roughnecks piled on, boots thudding, until a siren wailed distant, scattering them like roaches. We collapsed in the mud, Roy cradling his arm, me staunching a gash on his brow, rain mingling with blood and tears. It's over, he gasped, pain etching lines deep. Run while you can, but I held him tighter, the storm our shroud. Never without you. Sheriff arrived to soaked confessions. Jake's crew turning state's evidence for leniency. Old grudges aired, debts exposed as fiction. The ranch held, papers fraudulent, but the toll carved us hollow. Weeks blurred in recovery, Roy's arm in a sling, my bruises fading slower than the scars inside. We sold half the herd to settle true bills, the land leaner but ours. Summer baked the wounds closed, days of quiet labor, nights of mending souls. What now? He asked one evening, hammock swaying between porch posts, my head on his lap. I looked out at the mountains, eternal sentinels. We build. Together. No more running. By fall's turn, the ranch breathed anew, fences taut, herd grazing content, a small sign at the gate, Harlan Callahan Outfitters. Town talk simmered to embers, acceptance grudging but growing, a nod at the diner, a hand extended at auction. Roy's harmonica sang again, joyful riffs chasing sunsets, and in the barn, our first home, we'd dance slow to phantom tunes, bodies aligned like compass points. Love, we'd learned, wasn't the absence of storm but the standing in it. Roots deep in Wyoming soil, branches reaching for whatever sky we claimed. Years later, under that same harvest moon, we'd watch our adopted son, pulled from the system's wreckage, chase fireflies in the yard, Roy's good arm around my waist, his whisper warm, worth every scar, and I'd turn, kissing him deep, the cowboy who'd arrived to upend my world, now the steady beat of it. Nothing was the same, all right, and thank God for that.